You know him from his groundbreaking blockbuster films, Titanic, The Terminator, the Avatar series. His movies have won over 20 Oscars and are some of the very highest grossing and most expensive films of all time. But James Cameron is much more than an Academy Award winning filmmaker. He's also a scientific explorer, engineer, environmentalist, and pioneer of new technologies. His innovations have descended to the bottom of the ocean and soared into space. Cameron's latest documentary series, Secrets of the Elephants, dives into the lives of those majestic and mammoth animals. It will premiere on April 21st on National Geographic. Cameron's commitment to sustainability also inspired a move to New Zealand, where he and his wife live on an organic farm. We sat down recently here in New York. James Cameron, what an honor.
It's a huge honor to be on your show, Fareed. Thank you.
So if you look at the 4 highest grossing films in the history of the world, you've made 3 of them.
Yeah, it turns out that way.
And what's extraordinary to me is, each of these has grossed more than $2 billion.
Right.
But they do it all over the world. They do well everywhere. I was in India when Avatar, the new one came out. And India, as you know, is consumed with Bollywood movies. Hollywood has very small presence.
Historically, yeah.
Except Avatar was everywhere.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, what is it that you have found that appeals to so many people?
The things that I care about are trying to reach people emotionally. But I also am very visual, right? And, I get a lot of ideas from dreams and things like that. And I think that taps into the subconscious that we all kind of share, if you believe that kind of Jungian view of life. But I also think about that global market. And I think I don't want to do stuff that's just based on kind of current memes and current little cultural, kind of ideas and trends. I want to go back to sort of classic ideas, almost back to Greek tragedy and things like that. Things that affect everybody. So, for example, the new Avatar film is about family and bonds that we all share in any culture, any religion, any language group around the world. Titanic, about love and sacrifice and duty, which are things that, for example, maybe in Asia, mean a lot to people. So even though they had a language barrier to surmount to watch the film, it meant something to them, So I try to just tap into universals of human experience. Beyond that, I could get very specific about visual effects and things like that. But I think it's that universal sense of who we are as human beings.
You said you think about the world audience, the global audience.
Yes.
Do you think it helps that you live in New Zealand? You're sort of out of America.
I think it's interesting to live outside. I lived in Los Angeles for 47 years. I grew up in Canada before that. Now that I live in New Zealand, I think it's interesting to look back on American culture and society and politics and so on from an outside viewpoint and get a morning paper that sees it in a very different way. I think it's healthy, and I think more Americans should do that. Look into the bubble from the outside. I think if you think about it in a broader sense, that's how the Avatar movies work. They ask us to see through the eyes of nature, through these blue people, back at ourselves and our sins against nature that we collectively as a civilization are doing. Because I think maybe 1 in 1,000 people that goes to an Avatar movie actually roots for the humans, but we're a human audience rooting against ourselves, if you think about it in a strange way, through these kind of aspirational characters that really represent the best of us, or the way we imagine we can be, or maybe the way we used to be thousands of years ago.
Do you think, I think about this because when you look at Asia, which is modernizing and urbanizing so fast,
right,
they're in many ways despoiling the environment even more, and yet the movies do very well in Asia.
Yeah, I think we suffer collectively from nature deficit disorder, and we all need to reconnect. And I think because we were less urbanized when we were kids, certainly my age and maybe even the next generation behind me, we long for that sort of thing we had as children, where we were down in the grass, we were down in the soil, we collected birds and butterflies and flowers and things like that. We don't get that anymore. Our lives are so urbanized. We're here in New York right now. It's hard to even imagine that, when you just look out at that technical landscape. I think we long for it. And so people see something that they want in their dreams. I think there's something that's very kind of primitive about it, and primitive in us, atavistic, right? That we long for. And I just hope we can reconnect with that, because our urban life is devastating nature in order to support it.
How does the subconscious work as best you can tell? Because you were saying you get a lot of your ideas from dreams.
Yeah.
You're appealing to people in a way that they don't think of themselves, I think, a lot of people, as having this nature deficit disorder. I mean, they're much going around there. But somehow, it does feel like you're tapping into that.
Right. Well, I do think we have certain innate programming that's at a very deep level, much lower than higher brain function. And I think our subconscious, when it's operating either in the background during the day or at night, where it sort of takes over, is sort of processing internally in a way that scientists don't really understand dreams and the psychological purpose that they serve. I think they're kind of like a generative AI. I think they're making imagery from a vast data set that's our entire experience in life, and it's just making imagery. And then another part of our brain is supplying a narrative that goes along with it. And the narrative doesn't always make much sense, but we're storytelling to ourselves all night long, or at least during REM sleep. And I'm not a dream expert, I want to say up front, or a neuroscientist, but I think this is what's happening. And we're trying to make sense of the world, because we don't really remember like a videotape. We remember stories, like strings of beads. I went to a party, okay, I remember where it was, that's a bead. But you can't play back a whole tape of the whole thing. I'll remember this as an image, a picture of you, and some of the topics that we talked about, but I won't be able to play it back like a videotape. And if I do play back, a recording of it, I'll go, oh yeah, we said that was cool. Or not. Or I embarrassed myself. I wish I could take it back.
So Billy Joel said to me that he gets a lot of his music from dreams, and that
Interesting.
He'd get up or even later on he'd realize, and it's always the core, which was for him always the melody, the harmony, not the words. The words were a later add-on.
Interesting.
What do you explain how your dreams work?
It sounds to me like for him it's musical. For me it's images, and so just a bunch of random, sometimes very surreal images, sometimes beautiful, sometimes terrifying. And I've lately been thinking that there's a little bit of, it's not just the picture. There's a little metadata running underneath it that's telling me what the picture means. So for example, the Terminator was based on a single image of a chrome skeleton emerging out of fire. But the metadata said it used to look like a man covered in flesh, and the fire burned it away. And so it's actually a story segment. And then you start putting those story segments together, and then it starts to turn into a story you want to tell to other people. And I think storytellers sitting around the campfire in a cave 50,000 years ago were doing the same thing.
And so when you get those images, do you say to yourself, first of all, just mechanically, do you write it down?
Write it down sometimes, or actually draw it. Right. I remember
You have a background as an artist, right?
As a figurative artist. Yeah, exactly, representational. Illustrator, I guess, would be a better term. But yeah, I used to love to draw and paint, and that's right. I still do, but not as much, because now, in my current level of work in film, the film is my painting, the film is my art, and I get to work with the very best illustrators and design artists in the world. So I don't do it as much as I used to. I work through them, and they're better than I ever was, so it's okay.
But movies are a strange kind of art, because it's partly an art, but partly there's a lot of technology. I mean, look at if you could see, there's just so many cameras around us, and lights and sound and
computers.
You really embrace the scientific part of all that.
Yeah, I love the tech. I love the engineering. My mother was an artist and my father was an engineer, and so it's genetics writ large. I love the tech, and I love creating new tech. And I was at the advancing wavefront of CG as it started to sweep through, and this was going back 30 years now. But the Abyss was the first CG character that was a soft surface character. We had this kind of water tentacle that formed faces, and then that went on to the liquid metal guy in Terminator 2, and from there it progressed to other things. Jurassic Park, which I didn't do, Steven Spielberg did it. But then it built very rapidly. We could see the future was coming, that it would be that would be CG. So I like the tech side, but it's not, the irony is not lost on me that we use literally petabytes of storage and all these computer monitors and everything to make a movie about the most naturalistic state of the human experience. You know, and albeit they're blue aliens, but we're really celebrating that kind of indigenous wisdom keeper kind of idea using all this technology
And
and loving it.